people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from International Boxing News. McCaskill versus Ryan is signed. Jessica McCaskill and Sandy Ryan have signed up to unify WBC, WBO, and WBA world titles. The Ring Magazine belt will be on the line, one of the biggest fights in boxing.
The IBF title will not.
That title won't be on the line in Ryan versus McCaskill. It will be on the line in this weekend's fight, Tasha Jonas versus Kendi Wyatt.
We've talked about that.
Let's talk about this. What does Sandy Ryan have to do to deal with and handle Jessica McCaskill, who can be a handful, can be hard to handle?
Sandy's a boxer puncher.
She doesn't have as much experience as Jessica McCaskill, as many rounds in the bank with as many quality fighters. She doesn't have that advantage, but she does have the right base style for the job.
She's the bigger of the two, at least the taller fighter, the much taller, longer fighter of the two, and the younger fighter, some years younger than Jessica McCaskill.
Jessica, who in her last fight shared the ring with Chantel Cameron, lost a lopsided decision. It's the worst I've ever seen Jessica.
Who had already spent some time campaigning as a welterweight. For that fight, she moved down to junior welterweight, otherwise known as super lightweight, 140 pounds. Perhaps cutting that extra 7 pounds to make 140 took something out of her.
She looked flat opposite the ring, Chantel Cameron, who, much like Sandy Ryan, had the right base style for the job. Sandy, in spite of being domestic rivals with Chantel Cameron, to win this fight, she has to take a page out of Chantel's book. How do you beat a relentless pressure fighter?
You have to mitigate the action, mitigate the exchanges.
The advantage that boxer punchers have over pressure fighters is that pressure fighters generally, in a very general sense, they only have one way about fighting a fight.
Going about it.
Boxer punchers are more balanced. They have the same spite. Many of them have the same spite and the same mean streak as a pressure fighter, but they have a more balanced approach. They're not always the aggressor. They're not always the defender.
And that's the advantage. They're more malleable.
Flexible. With Jessica McCaskill, what you see is what you get. At her very best, she's barreling forward, throwing punches and bunches, and looking to outwork her opponent. So you know what you're getting into.
Sandy does.
How does Sandy stop that from happening? By creating space and maintaining it.
Fighting off Jessica McCaskill when she needs to fight her off.
And fending off Jessica McCaskill when she needs to fend her off. You don't want to do too much of the same thing. You don't want to just sell out every single time Jessica gets within striking distance, but you don't want to spend too much time circling away from Jessica.
It's going to look like you're getting outworked.
It's a balance of the two where the keys to victory lie. The keys to victory for Sandy Ryan. For Jessica McCaskill, her keys to victory.
She's a lot shorter than Sandy Ryan, which makes her a smaller target. If she can come in at a slight crouch or a slight angle, hunker down.
Or Sandy Ryan to give up some of that height to get off punches, to have to punch down to hit her.
As Jessica barrels forward, she can get her to bring that head closer to her fists to set up looping rights, overhand punches.
Slipping, rolling, and riding punches as she barrels forward to counter with big overhand rights. That's the ticket.
There's not much chance of Jessica breaking character. She's a pressure fighter through and through. That's the tried and true characteristic of pressure fighters.
She's not going to suddenly become a different fighter overnight just because she's fighting Sandy. So what she can do to win is focus on certain areas of her game, specific areas, upper body movement, head movement, as she comes forward.
She has to.
Jessica's shorter, a lot shorter than Sandy Ryan. Sandy's got the kind of height and length to box comfortably from the outside. Jessica doesn't have that option. She has to close the distance.
With a bit of fine-tuning, slipping, rolling, and riding punches as she barrels forward, she can put Sandy under a lot of pressure. Enough that maybe Sandy starts to wilt, Sandy starts to feel the pressure.
Spending less time overall engaging Jessica McCaskill and more time on her bicycle.
Easier said than done.
That's the assignment, and that's the hope for Jessica McCaskill. Educated pressure is the ticket.
Be a bad idea for Sandy Ryan to think she's going to outgun, outmuscle Jessica McCaskill stepping into her punches too much, engaging too much.
She'd be doing half the work for Jessica if she did that, because then Jessica doesn't have to work as hard to find her. She wants to be in the pocket with Sandy, as close to her as possible.
It's what she wants.
What she needs. She's got to mitigate the action. She's got to create space and maintain it in order to set traps for Jessica, who we all know is going to come forward.
You often hear it said in reference to Jessica that she's very messy and crude.
There's a difference between watching the fight from the outside and having to deal with the fighter on the inside. I mean, look at how she deconstructed Alma Ibarra, a fighter to the eye that was a more textbook and polished boxer than Jessica, but she didn't stand a chance when they shared the ring. Jessica McCaskill retired Alma Ibarra, a bigger woman than she is.
Sandy's bigger than she is.
Jessica's not going to let that stop her. If Sandy Ryan's not careful, if she don't mitigate the action, she could be in trouble. I really like this fight.
We've known it was in the works for some time, the fight between Sandy and Jessica.
Now it's here. Looking forward to it. And super middleweight news. A few days ago, Oscar De La Hoya teased that Jaime Munguia is interested in fighting David Benavidez and is looking forward to starting discussions. That
didn't seem realistic to me then. It seemed like Oscar was just cutting off his nose despite his face, knowing that Eddie Hearn wants to make Berlanga versus Munguia.
He gets to teasing at Benavidez versus Munguia, saying, awesome news. Jaime Munguia is very interested in fighting David Benavidez.
It was on Monday evening.
David Benavidez in recent days said, there's no fight with me and Morrell lined up. I just seen that supposedly they said I agreed to the fight. I'm like, man, this is my first time seeing about this. We're not fighting Morrell. So everything that's been coming out saying that we agreed to the fight, I didn't agree to anything. You know, I'm trying to make big fights happen right now. We want to fight Jaime Munguia. He came up to 168. I think that would be a great fight. Two big names, but if we can't get him, we'll probably do Morrell. But I'm just saying, man, there's a lot of fake news out there. If it doesn't come from me, then it's not official.
Well, it came from your father. It came from your promoter.
If what you're saying is that if it doesn't come from you, it's not official, what are you calling them?
What?
Are you calling them liars? Have they been lying?
Because the only reason people were under the impression that David Benavidez would fight David Morrell next is because those guys told us.
It came from them. It's not fight fans demanding a fight or content creators connecting the dots. Your father and your promoter literally said David Morrell would be next.
He's more interested in Jaime.
And the interest on the face of it, at least a few days ago, seemed mutual. To some, it seemed like the fight might actually happen this year, as Oscar De La Hoya stated, looking forward to starting discussions and what could possibly be fight of the year.
Some people took the bait.
And I didn't. I maintained a healthy level of skepticism because Jaime Munguia fights on DAZN and David fights on Showtime.
You know what the latest is?
The latest, according to Jaime, is that he believes a Benavidez fight is more likely to take place next year, not this one, and he's eyeing a November return at super middleweight.
Now that sounds about right.
That's what I thought. If you fed into all that talk about Benavidez versus Munguia next, you must be a wide-eyed optimist.
You must.
I think it's more likely to take place next year. Munguia told El Clinch podcast while in attendance for the WBC's weekly Martes de Café press conference. Benavidez has commitments this year. I plan to fight again at 168 in November, and then we should both be ready to fight next year.
Now, I don't know, next year, in May, provided that Canelo beats the shit out of Jermall Charlo.
We're supposed to be fighting in September of this year. Next year, he may be so confronted with David Benavidez in what would be the biggest fight of David's career. Bigger than a Jaime Munguia fight. Not saying that they can't make money with Jaime. They can, but they can make even more with Canelo. And if Canelo takes care of business in September,
David may be next in the rotation.
not Jaime. Jaime's win over Sergey Derevyanchenko was the second super middleweight bout for the still growing 26-year-old who admitted the unlikelihood of returning to middleweight. I don't think there is a need for me to stay at 160 pounds, revealed Munguia. I think we're good at 168.
My thoughts.
Well, I knew all that talk about David Benavidez versus Jaime Munguia was pie in the sky, at least for this year. There are network and promotional politics in play.
Somebody's got to cross the street. It's either Oscar ships off Jaime to Showtime like he shipped off Ryan, or the people at the PBC ship off David to DAZN.
Neither seemed likely. Neither seemed likely to me. Golden Boy Promotions and some of their Golden Gooses, their flagship fighters, they've been taking losses. Zurdo Ramirez was dominated by Dimitri Bivol. Ryan Garcia was stopped by Gervonta Davis, and you expect me to believe he was just going to truck off Jaime?
Send him to Showtime.
No way. A more sensible fight sensical fight is an Edgar Berlanga fight. Edgar Berlanga, who said, that's the biggest fight right now. I want him in the big house, Madison Square Garden, in the big room.
Edgar Berlanga and Jaime Munguia fight on the same platform.
That's the biggest fight right now, Berlanga told BoxingScene.com and other reporters immediately after his June 24th DAZN main event from Madison Square Garden's Hulu Theater in New York City. I want him in the big house, Madison Square Garden. That's the fight that everybody wants to see.
So what's the problem?
What's the issue? Both Edgar and Jaime fight on the same platform, so at least in theory, there should be no issue, but there is one. The rift between Eddie Hearn and Oscar De La Hoya. The axe to grind, I should say. The axe that Oscar has to grind with Eddie.
That's the issue.
Immediately after Edgar's fight this weekend, his Matchroom debut opposite the ring, Jason Quigley, Eddie Hearn expressed that he wants to make a fight between Edgar and Jaime, and Oscar De La Hoya, in so many words,
Blew off that idea. In so many words, he communicated he's not going to make Jaime accessible to Edgar.
which is what I meant when I said that Oscar, in essence, is cutting off his nose despite his face. A fight with Edgar is a more winnable fight to me.
More winnable than a Benavidez fight.
You'd rather send Jaime over to Showtime than have him box Edgar on your own platform?
Your broadcast partner.
We definitely want Munguia next, that's for sure, insisted Berlangia. That's the motherfucker that we want. He's Mexican, I'm Puerto Rican, I got the man here, Matchroom's Eddie Hearn, the best promoter in the business. I know he's gonna make it happen for us.
Oscar looked like he didn't want to make it happen. Perhaps he still doesn't.
And that hashtag, Lonesome Eddie, implying that Eddie ain't got no friends in the business, he ain't got nobody to work with, in this instance in particular, to make a fight for Edgar Berlanga. But I think with some pressure from the brass at DAZN, the higher-ups,
Oscar's bosses.
because he has them, Golden Boy's budget doesn't appear out of thin air. It's given to him by the people at DAZN. With some pressure from them, this fight might happen.
Fight between Edgar and Jaime.
Eddie Hearn, he's not taking Oscar De La Hoya's jabs lying down. He said, Oscar De La Hoya is a fucking complete idiot. Munguia is probably the worst managed career I've ever seen.
What does it say about Oscar that he's entertaining the idea of trucking off Jaime Munguia to some other platform instead of making the fight with Edgar when the fight with Edgar makes more sense?
Oscar De La Hoya works for DAZN. He's a fucking complete idiot, Hearn told BoxingScene.com and other reporters during a post-fight press conference following Berlanga's win. His job is to put on good fights with DAZN, and he hasn't really done that with Jaime Munguia. It's probably the worst managed career I've ever seen in the history of boxing. His opponent list is awful. Other than Derevyanchenko, recently, who turns to Berlanga, is also a faded fighter.
Oddly enough, Jaime Munguia can sell some tickets. I mean, he does have a grassroots following.
Whatever you or I might think about his matchmaking, he is a fighter that at least the paying public on the ground pay to see, though I don't think his fights are bringing subscriptions and new eyes to the DAZN platform, that he might be able to sell some tickets locally.
But his matchmaking ain't doing much for the platform.
What I'll do with Oscar De La Hoya is, I'll speak to his bosses and I'll come back to him, Hearn commented before clarifying on past business deals done between Matchroom and Golden Boy. I don't have to deal with Oscar directly. We will speak with Golden Boy president Eric Gomez, like we always do.
While Oscar plays chatty patty online, you have to figure that the brass at DAZN, the higher-ups,
How do you think they feel watching Oscar talking about sending one of their fighters that fights on their platform to some other platform when there's a perfectly good fight right there they can make?
he's unhinged.
Unleashed and out of sorts.
Berlanga versus Munguia is slightly more doable than Benavidez versus Munguia.
You heard what Jaime said. He said that's a good fight, but that's a good fight for next year, not this one.
So who does Jaime fight in November?
It's when he's looking to come back. And who does David fight? Who does David Benavidez fight? David Morrell, anyone?
It's a very fluid situation at super middleweight.
Very fluid situation between Eddie Hearn and Oscar De La Hoya. Eddie Hearn, who very recently addressed his critics, Oscar De La Hoya among them, saying De La Hoya, Ellerbe, Dibella are jealous and they'd give up their left testicle to be in this position. You've got Leonard Ellerbe, Lou Dibella, and Oscar De La Hoya, all completely obsessed with me, and they're all jealous. They would laugh at that, but they would give their left testicle to be in my position with TV deals, the roster, the global platform, and the schedule. It's weird to watch someone's demise.
Want someone's demise so badly.
It just makes me work harder and makes me more determined to win, Hearn told Boxing Social. The sentiment comes days after Hearn Hearn stated that U.S.-based promoters don't want him around, seizing market share.
Pretending that Matchroom has had no success in the American market, that they haven't put on big shows here when nothing could be further from the truth.
Matchroom's shows in America have made bigger waves in America than Oscar's shows in America. Don't confuse Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia with being a Golden Boy promotion show. It was Showtime and the PBC that were at the helm of promotion, not Golden Boy.
All that Golden Boy got out of that was getting to watch their Golden Goose get his clock cleaned.
You think about Lou Dibella, a fixture in the sport for years, a Hall of Fame inductee, but a promoter who's more like a booking agent. He doesn't have a broadcast partner, you understand.
No.
He doesn't have a DAZN or an ESPN, a Showtime behind him.
What's his problem with Eddie?
I think he's just tired of situations where he does any kind of business with Eddie, with Matchroom, and Matchroom seems to have the upper hand, but why wouldn't they? The money to finance these shows is coming from them.
Whenever Lou Dibella and Eddie Hearn did do business, those were Matchroom shows, not Dibella entertainment shows. I think Lou Dibella also resents that Eddie has this big budget to do shows in America, a bigger budget than he has, even though he's been in the sport.
Been a fixture in the American market for decades, but he ain't got a broadcast partner. Eddie does, and I think he resents Eddie Hearn for that. When it comes to Lennard, for years now, Eddie Hearn has been a thorn in Lennard's side. I think it all started when the people at DAZN first broke into America, and they were throwing all that money around. They made Gervonta Davis a huge offer, a sizable offer to come over and unify titles with then IBF Super Featherweight champion Tevin Farmer.
Gervonta Davis didn't take the offer. It was worth something like $7 or $8 million, but he didn't take it.
What might have started out as a professional rivalry has turned into genuine rancor and malice, at least on the part of Leonard Ellerbe, who's almost outraged that Eddie Hearn would have anything to say.
What do you expect? He's supposed to kiss your ass?
Compare Matchroom stable to Mayweather Promotions' stable. Don't confuse the PBC with TMT. TMT is but a subsidiary, just one promotional outfit within the PBC. There are several, and TMT stable is thin.
What else do they have besides Rolly Romero? Because they ain't got Gervonta anymore. I mean, until further notice...
He's not a TMT fighter, at least not right now. Maybe they'll bring him back into the fray, but...
What's the state of Mayweather Promotions? How many shows are they doing a year?
These guys don't like Eddie Hearn, and it seems a bit more than just a professional rivalry. They genuinely resent him, they genuinely don't like this guy, and you could argue that to some degree, they're jealous, at least Oscar might be, jealous that both Canelo Alvarez and Edgar Berlanga and Roberto Diaz, his former matchmaker, all chose Matchroom over Golden Boy.
Green-eyed monster.
Because you explain it. Why has Oscar De La Hoya been taking all these jabs at Eddie Hearn all this time? What is the issue, if not resentment, if not some degree of jealousy? He's promoting shows, or trying to, the same as you guys.
He's doing a better job at it than you guys are, though, isn't he?
I said it before and I'll say it again. They wouldn't spend as much time taking shots at this guy if he weren't a threat. If he weren't a threat, they wouldn't even mention him, but because he is...
They take every opportunity to take shots at this guy.
You see it.